I think you'd be hard-pressed to say, or find anyone for that matter, who thinks that Donald Trump has been good on the subject of race in this country. But the question is our president just tone deaf? Is he trying to score political points? Or is he, as many have said, and I use this word cautiously, is he racist? Well, yesterday, the president's campaign scheduled his first in-person rally since the virus hit. It is a week from today, June 19th in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and both the date and the location are more than problematic. June 19th is known to Black Americans as Juneteenth, commemorates the day the Emancipation Proclamation was first read in Texas, the final state where the proclamation was announced. It is a celebration of Black freedom in America, and today is a day to celebrate the freedoms through speeches, song, dance, marches, and other festivities. That the rally is on Juneteenth in Tulsa even adds another insult for Black Americans. It was home to the 1921 Tulsa race massacre, in which white residents attacked a part of town known as Black Wall Street. Now, reports vary, but anywhere between 30 and 300 Black residents of Tulsa were murdered. Now, survivors stayed quiet about it, and the massacre, it is rarely mentioned in the histories of the era or region. There is only one president who would look at both of those factors and still go ahead and hold the rally then and on that date, and it's the president that we have today. Here to discuss that and more, Ben Jealous. Ben, the former president and CEO of the NAACP, and he's the incoming president of the group People for the American Way. Ben, thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You know, when I was putting that together, then there was another. The convention speech now scheduled as it's been moved from North Carolina because the governor there had concerns over COVID, is now slated for Jacksonville. Not coincidentally, it'll fall on the 60th anniversary of the KKK attacks in that city. Do you chalk this up to coincidence after all this time? Or do you say, whether it's Stephen Miller or somebody else, this is conscious, this is intentional, this is a play to the worst of the base, the worst elements in this country?
What's clear is that it's known now, and they're deciding to go through it, and they're deciding to go forward with it anyway. Is it possible that there is a strategist in the White House who did this intentionally? Absolutely. That's the history of the party. It's the history of Lee Atwater. It's the history of Ronald Reagan when he launched his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, 16 years after Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner were lynched there. And the game is to try to appear reasonable, have the principle appear reasonable while sending a clear dog whistle to the most hateful portions of your base. I think the president would like for there to be sort of an extreme response from the left that would then shift the left to look more unreasonable in the minds of swing voters that everybody is competing for right now. But yes, absolutely. The president knows now, and he is choosing to go forward with it anyway. And it appears that this is a dog whistle to the most racist portions of his base.
I want to play a clip from earlier in the week. This was when, and it turned out to be premature, the president was looking at some good economic indicators that were showing that the depth of unemployment may not have been as bad. It should be noted they were readjusted upward after the fact. But nonetheless, for those who didn't hear it, listen to how the president chose to reflect on the window we are in time and the economic numbers. He said this.
Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying there's a great thing that's happening for our country. There's a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody.
Especially with what he said about George Floyd. You know, I don't want to spend the whole interview just talking about how the president, but I can't believe that, especially given the reaction that thing got from even those in the Republican Party, the idea after a person was literally had their life snuffed out in broad daylight and everyone calling it murder, the president said that he'd be happy today because the economic numbers came in good. My question is, and obviously in your new role, one of the principal goals is to make sure he doesn't get 4 more years. That can't have a broad base of appeal, that kind of a comment, can it?
What made that comment so outrageous is it came in the midst of a period of mourning. When George's brothers, his family were mourning, his 6-year-old daughter was mourning. at the start of a series of services. And that's what the president says. Setting aside the fact that the numbers for black people are sky high and had not gone down since the previous month, what he was really celebrating was that unemployment had gone down for white people in this country. It is incredibly tone deaf, and it's frankly that in the context of a bunch of conflicting things he says shows a president who is trying to speak out of both sides of his mouth. At the one hand, appears sort of upbeat and soothing to swing voters in the suburbs. On the other hand, dog whistle his base by being intentionally provocative. I think that what we can expect to see, given the signals of Tulsa and Jacksonville and his callousness in many comments since George Floyd's murder, is that he will increasingly double down on appealing to the most hateful part of his base. He will increasingly give up on swing voters, and he will just hope that he can turn out the most hateful core of the Republican Party like no one has ever done before.
You know, earlier today, Ben, in New York, the governor, flanked by both Reverend Sharpton, mothers who've lost their children to police violence, but also both the Senate Majority Leader and the Assembly Leader in the state. They signaled, I don't think it was just happy talk, it was tangible legislation that would require both mayors and police chiefs of every major city, if they want any state funding, to come forward with ways they'll be compliant with some of the new regulations regarding both transparency, banning certain police procedures, etc. Do you think that the change that's got to happen will be happening at the state level because of what Washington is, or do you hold out hope that we can get meaningful reform out of Washington?
The real reform, and this is what we're focused on at People For, the real reform is going to come first, the city level, at the county level. There will be some reforms out of Washington. We might get a ban on chokeholds. For instance, Rand Paul is pushing forward on that. But the real reforms, the ones that will really change the way in which public safety is handled in our country, will come first at the city and the county level. We at People For focused on the 20 biggest metro areas where half of black people live, because we've got to get real reform right now.
I saw a number here that 40% of black-owned businesses may not reopen because of COVID, and a lot of those companies never saw, federal relief here in that way. This is more of a strategy question, and I come back to what we saw after Sandy Hook, where we wanted to have broad reform after those horrific shootings, but in the end, the argument can be made that it was too broad-ranging and it made it easy for people to vote no to a broader package. Do you want to see reform focusing on policing right now? Because you can make an argument, whether it be housing, education, economic equity.
You gotta deal with both.
Can you do them at the same time?
Every uprising in U.S. history, from the Boston Massacre forward, has been sparked by abusive policing. If we are at the beginning of a long, hot summer, if we do not start acting now in our cities and our counties, we are going to have a very tough several months in front of us. So let's be clear. But that's just the spark. What determines whether that spark turns into a blaze is underlying tensions in joblessness, unemployment, housing, and I would say in this COVID moment, in healthcare as well. And so, yes, we have to act with courage on that. Donald Trump likes to talk about it, but his walk has been deadly for black businesses. Black businesses under his administration in this crisis, 95% of them that should qualify for PPP loans have not gotten them. And so, yes, we are in a moment where you've got to deal with both and with courage. But you cannot step away from police reform in this moment. It is always the spark. And the fastest thing we can do to make sure that we have more peace in our communities and more justice in our country is to reform policing, frankly, aggressively.
Ben, I appreciate the time, and also best of luck at People for the American Way. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Everybody, coming up next, two prominent Democrats, they're warning that Trump may try to steal the election or refuse to give up power even if he loses. And when you combine that with the utter lack of election preps going down this past week in Georgia, well, we could be looking at election chaos or worse. We'll discuss that next.